Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Castle of Horror interview segment where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the steampunk graphic novel Clockworks, with co-writer Tony Salvaggio, due this September from Humanoids. This week, USA Today and New York Times bestseller Wendy Corsi Staub is with us, the award-winning author of more than 80 novels, and has twice been nominated for the Mary Higgins Clark Award. She lives in the New York City suburbs with her husband and their two sons. Learn more about Wendy at wendycorsistaub.com. Blue Moon is the book we're going to be talking about. It is the second novel in a series from New York Times bestseller Miss Staub. It is about Mundy's Landing, a small town with a sinister secret shrouded in legends about horrible murders from the early 1900s. It is just out. Isn't that right, Miss Staub? It just came.
Yes, it's out a week.
Yes.
A week today, actually. Yep. No, 2 weeks today. 2 weeks today.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so what I thought we would do, now very generally, Blue Moon is the second book, but I believe these are standalone mysteries. Blue Moon is the second book in a new series you've got called Mundy's Landing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you afterwards whether any of the characters cross over from the first book, which is called Blood Red, which was very well received. But I thought the best way to kick this off would be if you could read a section that we marked off for you on page 30, starting page 30 to 31 in the paperback version that I have with me. If you could read that, that would be great, and then we'll go into the story.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Annabelle stashes the ice cream in the ice-encrusted freezer. Then she heads into the storm porch and stops short. The back door is slightly ajar. Did she leave it that way? She must have, right? Right. She opens it, closes it firmly, and goes down the steps through the sun-speckled shade toward the open trunk of the car. She can hear the clock's final chime through the open window screens. Songbirds trill high overhead. A lawnmower hums on a distant block, and somewhere nearby a twig snaps. About to reach for the last couple of grocery bags in the trunk, Annabelle pauses. She looks past the pair of cheap aluminum lawn chairs perched on the cracked concrete apron beside the carriage house, a makeshift patio she and Trib joked when they sat there the other night for as long as Oliver and the mosquitoes would let them. The sound came from the rear thicket of overgrown shrubs and trees. Probably another stray cat, she thinks. They keep coming around, looking for Augusta and a kibble handout. But as she looks at the foliage, she realizes that it isn't a cat at all. A human silhouette is distinctly visible among the trees. She blinks. It's still there. What do I do? Mom, I'm home. Mom? Oliver calling to her from inside the house. She grabs the bag, slams the trunk, and hurries toward the back door, shooting an uneasy glance over her shoulder when she reaches it. The shadow is gone.
Thank you very much for reading that. I wanted to choose that because that's right very early in this story of a woman who has just moved into a house that is unfamiliar to her personally, but is familiar to everybody in this town. So why is that? What's going on in
this house is one of three so-called murder houses. 100 years ago in Mundy's Landing, the creepiest crimes took place. On 3 subsequent summer mornings, local families woke up, and in their guest rooms they found strangers tucked into their guest beds. All 3 were girls, young women. All 3 looked as though they were sleeping. Their hands were folded. Their hair was braided. They were wearing pristine white nightgowns. There were notes under the pillows of all 3, and all 3 throats had been slit. And the unusual thing about it was that no one knew who they were. The people who lived in the houses had never seen them before. Nobody in the town had ever seen them before. There was bedlam. Like, they put it in the newspaper. They were looking to identify these girls, and no one ever came forward and knew who they were. No one knew who killed them, and no one knew why they were put in those houses. Yeah. So 100 years later, those are the murder houses.
and she's just moved into a murder house. It's the first home that she's owned with her husband. It's this delightful sort of young couple and their extraordinarily sensitive young son, who is given to fits of anxiety, I think you would call it, but I don't even know what technically.
He has a diagnosed anxiety disorder, so he's basically a special needs kid, and the smallest things terrify him. So for her to now be dealing with living in this murder house with this kid, it's really hard on everybody.
And of course in the plot of this book, we've got she's moved into one of the murder houses at a time that a new serial killer has just arisen who is obsessed with the same series of murders that took place. And in fact, in this world that you've created, these murders are super famous. But this guy is really, really obsessed, and he wants to live that out.
Yeah, he solved the murders actually. The plot hinges on this festival. I guess you would call it a festival, but they call it Mundy Palooza. And every year the Historical Society, sort of as a publicity stunt to draw tourists, they invite people to come from around the world and try to solve these unsolved crimes of 100 years ago. So the killer has done just that, and he wants to recreate them 100 years later, like on the exact locations where they took place.
Right. So I'm curious about a lot of things here. You've created this world called Mundy's Landing. Now, the first book that was called Blood Red, did it involve the same characters, similar, or not at all? Or are they just all situated around this particular town?
I introduced most of the characters that are here, just sort of in cameo little walk-on type roles because I knew they were going to come forward and have their own story. But the first one took place, it was in the town. There was a character named Rowan Mundy, and it wraps up, it takes place, wraps up all in that one story, and then the stage is set for this new book. So as you said, they're standalone, and many of the characters, Ora Abrams, she's the Historical Society curator. She's one of my favorite characters, and she takes center stage here, but you meet her in the first book, and she's in book 3, which I'm writing right now.
Why 3? I mean, it seems to me standalones because these could be like the Reacher novels. It could just sort of go on forever.
Yeah, I tried to tell my editor that. She wanted to be perfectly honest. No, you know what it is? I write domestic psychological suspense, and it's always nice to create a world, and I've been doing that with each trilogy that I've written. I think this is my 4th trilogy for Harper. So when you have books that are connected and you have a character who's just an ordinary person, it's kind of unbelievable to make it, realistic that they would stumble across a dead body every so often, So in this case, we said, hey, how about if we set it in a town where murder is sort of, the cottage industry. That's what goes on in Mundy's Landing, and that makes it realistic.
That's nice.
3 books?
Well, there's so much I'm thinking about here. I mean, first of all, the plot point of the small family moving into a house with a past, and you can think about things like, burn offerings.
Yes, burn offerings, love it. Yes.
Oh, fabulous! Man,
one of my favorites.
But you've put this in this small town, and you even have a map of the town. It's so cool to me that there's like a map of this little village, like with where different people's houses are and stuff. So
I'm going to pass that. I have to pass that compliment along. My son did that. He's
really?
about to be a college freshman. Yeah, he walked into my office one day, and I had, by my desk, I had sketched out Mundy's Landing when I was writing the first book. I was trying to remember where things were and how it looked and how it's laid out. He saw that and said, what is that? Because I could do that a lot better for you. And when he did it on his computer, the publisher saw it, and they wanted to put it right into the book. So that's
wonderful. No, it really is. Great, but it puts me instantly in mind. See, to me, when I come across something like this with a little town like that, and everybody knows one another, and everybody, I've been thinking about this kind of story a lot recently, and so it was kind of fortuitous that I came across your book because, I'm fascinated by stuff like Peyton Place and King's and all that, and even modern, like Broadchurch, which is really just Peyton Place.
Oh, I loved it.
murder,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
And there's something I think that I guess British people as well, but like Americans love about being sort of plunged into a town where everybody knows one another and all the secrets are burbling underneath. And did you feel that? Did you have an affinity for those kinds of books and stories? Or
definitely. I grew up in a small town, and even though I live in the New York suburbs now, it's still a small town. And you still feel like, every time something bad happens here, people say bad things don't happen here, or, we really know the neighbors. So to me, there's nothing scarier to me than feeling like you're safe, feeling like you're in a safe haven, and then something, danger comes into it. So I play with that theme a lot when I write.
Absolutely. No, and it's funny. That's such a part of our sort of soap opera past in America, and it's always been weird to me that soaps themselves have fallen away. I have no idea what's replaced it, but that fascination with the small town. Most people don't live in a small town, so I have to think that, yourself notwithstanding,
right.
For most people it's more or less a fantasy. It's
right.
It's, gosh, wouldn't it be great to close my eyes and think down the street is the corner store, and over there is the handyman, and over there is the guy who used to be the preacher, but he's just a drunk now, and he hangs out in front of the library.
you know him.
I was making this up, but I'm thinking, there's just like
ringing
just,
true.
Right, all these people who make up small town America. I mean, the irony is gone, or you would think it's gone, because Peyton Place came out something on the order of 60 years ago or more. So, so by now we're probably, you'd think we're accustomed to the hypocrisy of small towns, but I think we love to keep hearing about it. Wow. So did you pattern Mundy's Landing after literally the town that you're living in, or is it something else?
You know what? I took bits and pieces of the town I'm living in, which literally appears in the book trailer. This video book trailer.
Oh, cool.
This is the stand-in. But also, and my hometown. I grew up way upstate New York, near Buffalo, in an industrial town, a former steel town, and
Sure.
I took the Mundy's Landing economy, is based on that town, because when the industry dried up, all along the Great Lakes and up into upstate New York and the Hudson Valley, when the industry left, the towns crumbled up and fell apart. And basically downtown, you have abandoned storefronts. So I wanted that economic decline to trigger this Mundy Palooza thing and all the tourism, because then you'd have the old guard saying, hey, this is our dirty little secret. We don't want to shed any more light on this and capitalize on it. But you'd have the business people saying, bring in the tourists. We need the money. So I took that. My hometown is on a harbor, and you always have people who want to bring in tourism
Sure.
and people who want to keep it the way it is. So
Absolutely.
That was familiar to me.
Property values down,
right.
Which in
right.
turn
keep the outsiders out. Keep it familiar. Yeah.
Freaking people hunting for their antiques and whatever they
have. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that here.
Wendy, you pointed out in the book also that even that time has passed, and now the time in which this little boy is growing up, this is a world where now that recession has itself receded, and now those storefronts have opened back up, and there's a lot of swank shopping.
Oh, yeah.
On these downtowns. And we've seen that in America as well.
Yeah, that's more like where I live now. The wealthy people moving up from the city and the Lexuses and the Range Rovers, all of that. And then you have the people who have lived there forever just sort of feeling, squeezed out. So there's just so much you can do with a setting like this. It's almost that the town becomes a character, and it's a very rich character that I know very well now.
That's wonderful. That's really great. I hope that you get a chance. I mean, honestly, I hope that you just kind of keep doing them. Just
I thought of that. I'm up for a new contract after this. I thought, I wonder if they want more.
I know what you mean. I totally know what you mean. Okay, so I want to ask you a little bit about your style, particularly in the section you were just reading. This was in this third-person present tense,
right.
which we hear from time to time, but isn't the if you pick up a typical Stephen King, it's usually third-person past,
right.
Occasionally first-person present,
right.
But this third-person present. So what made you pick that? And is this your first book like that, or have they all been that way, or what?
Now, you know what? Interestingly, I started out wanting to write young adult suspense and horror, and that's what I did. That's how I was first published 23 years ago, my first book. And then that market dried up, and there was no more young adult horror, so I turned to adult suspense. My editor told me to give that a try. So when I was writing the YA, I always wrote it in, present tense, third person, or first person present, but I thought that adult suspense had to be past tense. So I wrote it past tense. I gave him 3 chapters, and I thought, God, this feels flat. There's something wrong with it. And he felt the same way. And I said, you know what, can I give it a shot in present tense? I know that's not what we do, but can I try it? And he let me do it, and it sang. From the moment I changed the tense, it just felt like my voice. So from then on, I that's how I write them. Feels natural.
That's really fabulous.
Thank you.
Actually, you said you moved from one to the other depending on the genre.
Yeah.
And, next book around, you could completely change your mind.
Yeah. And I have, I have definitely written past tense. I've written first person, but this feels natural to me for suspense because if things are happening in the moment, I just think it sort of lends to the page turning feel.
No, it does. It does, and it also allows you to go, deeply into the mind of the character that you're following.
Yeah, I try, and then I try to get back out when it's time to go to bed.
Right. Oh, no, for sure. In the course of these early chapters, we're in the mind of Annabelle, we're in the mind of a killer, we're in the mind of one of the victims, and you've also scattered in all of these historical documents, which are very creative, these diary entries and so forth. So that's cool stuff. I mean, it really does seem intent to grab somebody who's into these. I heard somebody describe it as cozy with blood.
Oh, wow.
That's great. that they're like, there are dark books out there. Okay, I've read books that do haunt me, in violent and horrible ways that we're not reaching here. These are dark, but they're not that dark.
They're not graphic. They're not violent. Yeah.
They're violent. They're scary.
I mean, they're violent. They're violent. It's more off screen. It's more. Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's.
Yeah. I mean,
they're not graphic.
And this isn't. In other words, this isn't Bret Easton Ellis doing American Psycho.
No. Which my son just read. My other son. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes. Yeah. And hey, I can read that kind of thing from time to time, but I really like this style here. I like this sort of, this could be an R-rated or PG-13 movie. This could be something that. So that's pretty neat, and also given my love for like I say, like Peyton Place and Kings Row and all that.
Oh yeah, I love it. Thanks for the comparison.
So I got one more question I want to ask you, and that's about process. So we talked about your tense, but when you're going out to write, you're under a contract, or you just told yourself, hey, I need to get a book written by, I'm going to make this up, by October 1st.
That's
what
true.
Would you do?
Yes, that's true.
Well, what would you do? I mean, would you take a notebook out to the library? Do you shut yourself up in a bedroom? What do you do?
Yeah, you know what? I really like to live it and breathe it, and I shut myself into my home office. I am not one of those people who can write in a coffee shop or in, I need to be at my desk in my office and just go at it for hours and hours on end. And so that's what I do. I have to travel a lot, so that's the complication these days. I have to travel a lot for work, so when I'm away, I have a really hard time writing. When I'm home, I do 12 to 14 hours a day, and I don't take a day off. Every single day I'm just sitting in my office pounding away at the book. And it's basic math.
I apologize. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say it's basic math. Like if I have to have a 100,000 word book due on, such and such a date, I know exactly how many weeks I'm going to be home of those days, and I know how many pages I have to write per week to get it done. And I put a page number on the calendar every Friday, and I have to make that page number, or I'm off track. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, no, I've actually given this lecture a lot of times in schools, and I do just a simple one. When you think about that, October 1, that's almost exactly 2 months. So I say, okay, you got 2 months, and you have to turn in something that's just to make it easy, 200 pages long. So that
right.
means that after 1 month, how many pages do you need? And they all go, well, 100. And I said, okay, so after 2 weeks, how many do you need? And they go, 50.
Right.
I said, okay, so this week, how many do you need? And they could go, 25. And I said, 25. If you don't have 25 pages by the end of this week, you're late.
That's great that you see. That's always been my MO, because I think that, it makes sense. You can't do the bulk of the book in the final week and just,
right.
I mean.
This isn't something you can stay up late.
Right, exactly, which is kind of what I'm trying to do now. So I'm going to eat my words because I have a book due and another one in October. But the truth is, it's just about getting the work done. Get your butt in the chair, sit down, and get your pages done. And it's very simple, really, at the end of the day. Sit there until it's done.
But, what do you call it? Block happens, getting bored happens, getting disillusioned happens, all that stuff can happen. But, still, there's nothing like actually when you finally, you hit on the project that you're going to be working on, and then you just go, okay, we're going to get this done, and the pages start piling up. That's the best
feeling. That's the best feeling. And for me, I really need to tune out the world for that to happen. And that's hard when you're living your real life. I always have people come and say, how do I write a book? How do I get started? How can I don't have time. And I always think, nobody really has time, but you just take an hour a day and you just make yourself sit there.
Sure. Some people get up
always
in the morning.
Something interesting.
The story goes that Jane Austen used to write just like, on a little notepad next with her needlework, that it was just, she'd pick it up and do a couple of pithy paragraphs and then put it away.
Longhand. Oh, God.
Yeah, right. I'm doing longhand right now, actually.
Are you?
Yeah.
How does that work? And what made you do that? That's interesting.
I was just having a hard time getting started on a project, and then I figure 5 pages of longhand is about 200 each, so it's about 1,000 words. So if I could just not have the computer, just sit down.
Right, because that's the distraction, right?
And just mark off 5 pages and go, fill these pages, and you're done for today. And, I find honestly that I can write as quickly as I can compose as long as my handwriting isn't very good,
right.
And then, the negative is you have to then transcribe it into the computer later. So that's a pain.
But that's a really interesting, that's interesting to me, because lately I really have been running into, it's not block, it's just a distraction of the computer, and you flip over to look something up, and an hour later, after you've been on Facebook and you try, that's really been a problem lately. And I always think, but I can't turn it off because I'm always researching. But longhand in a room, that makes good sense.
Well, I mean, literally. What? So you grab a 79-cent spiral notebook, because I did a whole book this way, and now I'm doing another one. 79-cent spiral notebook, you just take that notebook and a good pen, and then you go out to a park, and you can just write 5 pages in the sunlight,
Right.
It's even more portable than a laptop in my experience so far. But, your mileage may vary, but I am experimenting with longhand right now, so... I'll let you know. I'll let you know if it's a success. So.
No, I love that, and I also love knowing that it's sort of something we all face. Everybody faces that distraction. It's a shiny object, and it's not going away for sure. So you have to kind of make it. You have to mute it.
Well, no, exactly, because you go, what does a police detective carry in the backseat of his car?
Yes.
And so you look it up, and suddenly you're reading all these white papers on what police detectives are supposed to be carrying, and this is bullshit. I mean, this is not what you need to be doing.
No, and I used to. I've been writing for 23 years. I didn't used to do this. I'm trying to remember. I think it's always, back then I'd fix it later. Now it's always about get it right the first time, because you can,
Because you can. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I remember the first book that I wrote, I had the castles in this book were made of stone, and then after I finished it, I was still doing research, and I came across this reference to, in that part of the country, all the castles are made of wood. Well, okay, so then I had to go back and change, and I got some new good scenes out of the fact that they were wood and flammable and yada yada. But if in the modern internet era, it would have basically it would have just slowed everything down, honestly.
Oh yeah, you can lose days, and especially like writing this stuff. This is historical. I love history, and that alone for me was tough.
Now the White City murder that you reference a lot. That's a true story. I did not read the Devil in the White City, but was that one of the books that was influencing you, or?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was a big influence. I've always been fascinated by the World's Fair and that era, just the gay 90s and the Gilded Age, and especially in the Hudson Valley where this book is set. So I loved that, and I knew that Lizzie Borden needed to come into play a little bit because that was part of my influence. Because Fall River is a town that, like Mundy's Landing, it's famous for these horrible murders, and that to me was fascinating and something that I wanted to bring into it.
I think that's wonderful territory you're in. The upstate New York, like I was up there looking at the grave of Mark Twain. And it's so. I think that's Elmira. That is.
Yeah, and he spent some time all over upstate, including my hometown, and
it's a haunted
it is Elmira.
It's a wonderful world, and it's just a big atmosphere. All right. Well, Wendy Corsi Staub, it has been such a delight to talk to you about Blue Moon and about your style and your process. I really can't wait to finish reading it. I just started like a day and a half ago, and I'm really loving it. And I hope I get a chance to talk to you again. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Really fun.
Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.